I had a series of 3 dreams. In my first dream, I saw the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. She had long dark hair, and it was tumbling all the way down to her ankles. Every strand of hair on her head was woven round with a hairline strand of gold or platinum or silver. It was so intricate. She had on a long wedding dress, and on this wedding dress were sewn millions of pearls. And as I looked, I knew there was one pearl for each of us that loves the Lord. These weren't the pearl with a bit of grit in the middle, like Jesus described as being like the kingdom of heaven. These were the clean pearls, the ones that really love the Lord and have really been baptized into Jesus, and he's really living in him, the ones that have really repented and really love him. The dress was made out of all these different beautiful materials, and there was organza in the dress. And every time this woman moved her foot, millions of rainbows shot off, and they were just falling to the ground and disappearing. She had on a long veil I couldn't see the end of, and that as well was sewn with pearls. And in among all these pearls was rubies and diamonds and emeralds. She had gold on her fingers and platinum on her neck and on her feet. But her feet were adorned, but she had no shoes on. She was dancing, but she didn't leave the spot she was standing on. You know, that was the end of the first dream. The next night I dreamt again and started exactly where it had left off. But as I started to dream, this time I saw an ambulance pull up next to this beautiful bride. I mean, obviously I knew now that was the bride of Christ I was looking at. And all what she was wearing and all the adornments were created for her. And she wore them well. She was stunning. But I saw this car pull up. And out of this car, the driver's door opened. And a man got out. Then the other doors opened. And 11 men followed them. So there was 12 in all. The first man, the driver, got out of the car and he walked over to this beautiful bride. And he grabbed her by the hair. And he pushed her face to the ground and he broke her teeth and her nose. And I stood in my dream and I wanted to do something and I couldn't even wake up. Then, one by one, each of the men raped the beautiful bride. I was watching in horror, and when I woke up and the next day I was thinking that couldn't have been God that gave me that. That couldn't have been God. As I watched, they all raped her. And then I saw the first man put his right hand over his left shoulder. As he did so, he went like this and he pulled out the most wicked knife I have ever seen. Please bear with me because I really believe this is a word for the church. The knives were made of bone handles and they were shaped like this. They were curved and they were serrated. They were split like a snake's tongue at the end, and there was a barb on the end of each tongue. And as the man did this, he picked her head up and he brought the knife down and he cut off the face of the bride. And her face was laying next to her, but there was this red oval. And then every other man took out a knife and they all stuck it in a different part of the body. It was then that I realised there was a word burnt into the handle of each knife and into the handle of the knife that cut off the face. And, you know, I was thinking about this even in my dream. And, you know, Jesus, when he was crucified, it doesn't say so in the popular versions and stories and that. But, you know, in the Old Testament, it tells you that they ripped off his beard. They didn't pluck it out. They didn't use imac or a razor. They tore his flesh. They ripped his beard off his face. And I was thinking of Mary Magdalene and when she went to the tomb, and I can't imagine Mary Magdalene not knowing her Jesus, you know. She's gone there, she's walked straight past him. He met the 2 on the road and they didn't know him. Could that have been because he was disfigured? And now I'm watching the bride of Christ laying on the floor and no face, and I believe Jesus is coming back soon.
Yes.
And I want him to recognise us.
Yes.
I know there'll be a bride of Christ. I know there will, because he won the battle. But are we going to be part of it? Is he going to recognise us? This is what the words were on the other knives. The one that went into the left hand had divorce burnt into it. The one that went into the right hand had fear of man, political correctness. The one that went into the stomach had abortion burnt into it. And the one that went into the back of the knees had disobedience. The one that went into the pelvis and groin had homosexuality burnt into the bone handle. The one that chopped off her legs had Freemasonry. The one that went into the eyes was unrepentance. Into the lips went theft of salvation of the words of the lost. The face was compromise. The neck was stubbornness. The heart was apathy. And the ears was liberalism. As I was watching this happening, the pearls on the dress were just rolling everywhere. They were falling off the dress because everything was getting ripped. There was blood everywhere, and the pearls, some of them were sticking to the ground where there was pools of blood, but others were just being lost. They were just rolling everywhere, millions of them. Is that the ones that have backslidden? Is that the ones that don't love the Lord anymore? Is that the ones that are confused by what is church all about today? I don't know, but I do know they were the ones that had meant it. They had given their life to the Lord, and here they were, just rolling everywhere. And I woke up. Next night, the dream started exactly where that one had left off. But this time I'm looking, and the men are gone, and the bride of Christ, she was laying on the ground, and she was bleeding, and she was just in such a mess, and it just broke my heart, it was just awful. And I looked, and I could see on her legs and on bits of her hands, and she had little bits of the wedding dress were stuck to her, and it was dried on by bits of blood. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's the remnant. That's the remnant of the ones that are, the remnant of the true, that really we're the fundamentalists. We're the ones that believe that every word in here is the word of God. We're the ones that want to see God back in our land, And that remnant, bits of remnant was still sticking to the bride. She was laying there ill, but it was still sticking to her. Then an ambulance pulled up. The men put the bride onto the stretcher, but while they were doing it, they were sobbing. I saw them pick up her face and lay it next to her, and they carefully picked up the legs and they put that there. The next thing I'm nearly finished now, but the next thing they were running, held full pelt through a casualty door. And this is the bit that I think is the most important. As they shot through the casualty door, there was a whole team of highly trained nurses and surgeons who had seen all sorts of terrible things, plane crashes, car crashes, train crashes. What they hadn't seen and dealt with, you'd think nothing would faze them. And they knew their job well. Everything was already inside them to know what to do. And they turned round and they saw what came through the door, and they looked at the trolley. And I don't know if you've played statues when you were little, music stops, you turn to stone. That's what happened. They froze.